Let's now take a look at avoiding parallels and tangents in our character drawings. And when we think about parallels particularly, we don't want to just think of two parallel lines. We want to think about anything that parallels, ideas that parallel, shapes that parallel, negative space that parallels, objects that parallel. And so the first thing we want to avoid is something called mirroring. And mirroring is when one side of the body tends to overly mirror the other. So for example, in this basic drawing here, I'm going to create the arms in a fashion where they mirror one another. So pretend I was planning this to be a final drawing and I'm busy doing my dynamic shapes here. I'm going to have this character's arms basically doing exactly the same pose. This is mirroring, right? So essentially the shape here is mirrored on both sides and it creates a visual parallel for the viewer. And visual parallels are really bad. They suck, they're boring, they dull the image to the viewer, and we want to avoid them. And obviously to correct that, we would focus on perhaps making one of the arms do a different pose. So the first thing we want to avoid is mirroring, right? We do not want any mirroring. Okay. Let's put that to one side. The next thing we want to avoid is something called sawtoothing. And sawtoothing is this kind of pattern or shape. And you most commonly see this when people are drawing hair or fur. And the reason sawtoothing is pretty terrible is because it too is also a visual parallel. All of these little triangular structures are exactly the same and they mirror each other. And what you want to strive for rather is shape-based composition theory, where you are varying the size of elements. So here we have different size of elements going on for hair and fur, and we aren't sawtoothing. So keep sawtoothing in mind and avoid it at all costs, especially when you're doing hair and fringes. Do not sawtooth. All right, so that's what sawtoothing is. Then we're going to talk about curves against straights, particularly in a shape sense, right? Particularly in a shape sense. Let's say, for example, you're busy doing the final touches on an arm, and we'll start with the shoulder here, and pretend we've already planned out all of our dynamic forms and so on, and we want to draw the arm. And we've drawn the upper arm here, and then we can come down here, and we'll just draw in the lower arm elements here, for example. This area over here is very much paralleling. And you might say, well, isn't this crazy? Aren't we going into too much detail? I think that arm looks fine. I would say to you, no. We have to basically spend a lot of our time eliminating parallels. And so what we'd want to do here is use the straight against curve theory to try and straighten up one side and leave the other side curvy. And so in this instance, what we could do to modify this is really say, oh, well, let's make the tricep more of a straight shape. And you can see that overall, we get a much more dynamic looking arm because we have this visual straight contrasted against this curve. And again, what we're doing here is we are eliminating parallels. Okay, so we want to spend a lot of time eliminating parallels in our work, and straight against curve, for the purposes of eliminating parallels, is one of the best tools that we can use. And last but not least, we want to definitely take a position where we are eliminating tangents. And tangents will creep up on you if you're not paying attention to your line overlaps. I'm just going to make all of these a little bit smaller just so that we have a bit more space to draw here. As a basic example, I'm going to draw a tangent of an arm and a shoulder. It's a common area for a tangent to occur. So let's say we have our chest drawing over here. And we're going to put our arm over here. And now I'm getting ready to go and do some of my detailed anatomy drawing on top here. And so what you will see sometimes is that people will kind of just put this shape like that, and we'll move into the arm. And what is happening is that we're forgetting to put the overlap in. So to the viewer, it's not clear whether the bicep here, or the arm muscle here is, or the arm itself, should I say, is in front of the chest or not, or if the chest is in front of the arm. And there are instances where you really need to show that. And so what we need to do, we've learned about this already, but I wanted to reinforce in this lesson, is overlap, right? We want overlap. And we have to be very aware of these tangents happening in our pieces. So these 4 things are really, really something we want to be paying attention to all the time. And you'll have exercises dealing with this, helping you to make sure that you're always aware and always looking out for, let's call them the 4 evils of drawing. All right, eliminating parallels, making sure we're not mirroring elements in our piece. Those are visual parallels, symbolic parallels. Making sure we don't have sawtoothing, shape parallels. And of course, we want to make sure that we are showing our overlaps clearly, so that we're supporting the forms that we've worked so hard to establish in our drawings. Let's move on.